It's asking the right questions. It's doing the diagnostic. It's getting to what truly ails them and then being prescriptive in that. So it's not explaining or demonstrating what might solve the problem that they know they're coming to you with. It's diagnosing the issues they might not even know they have.
And when and where should sales professionals use the power story?
I think right from the opening, honestly, I think right from the first outreach, you should be trying to paint a story, and you need to connect and educate around the pains that you know others like them are or should be experiencing that, ultimately, you could solve, but make it about them and make it about the pain. We're living in a world of non-trust, in a way, of disinformation that exists. And so can you be truth in it? And what does that look like? And what does that mean? Can you be the good doctor in this environment in it? And I think that that's where ultimately success comes from in the future.
Hey everybody, Chris Del Torio. Excited for today's podcast. I actually really am. I've got a guy, Tom Pisello. So first off, Tom, thanks for joining. Good to have you here today.
Thank you, Chris. Great to be here.
Yeah. So Tom and I first met, give or take 10 years ago with a mutual friend, Greg Price, somebody else who has a total command of the selling process and value and making business case for things. And Greg left, and Tom and I were sitting outside of Prestonwood Country Club. It happened to be having a few beers, and we kind of looked up, and you get two sales guys, longtime guys together, and everybody left, the place shut down, and Tom and I are still talking. So long overdue to get back together, Tom.
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. So Tom's book, Frugonomics, is the survival guide. And I love you call yourself the ROI guy, which is so spot on, but how to stand out, how to sell more. And one of the things that I wanted to kind of start off for our audience, which is going to be a bunch of sales leaders, sales gurus, entrepreneurs, business owners, the most overused term, in my opinion, really important, but really overused, is value. And it's literally the only thing customers will pay for. But as a whole, we're not very good at articulating our value. There's so much BS we put our prospects or clients through before we get to the meat on the bone. And I think your book does such a phenomenal job of cutting through that. I bought it shortly after we met, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'll get to that. I remember I was on a flight. I don't remember where I went, but I was on a flight. And my only disappointment after reading it was I always have highlighters and pens and stuff, because I wanted to highlight and star everything in the darn book. It was that good. But for our audience out there, let me start with this one for you.
Mm-hmm.
When you discuss the importance of communicating effectively, what are the pitfalls that you're seeing salespeople fall into the trap of? And conversely, what are the great ones doing out there when it comes to articulating value?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest pitfalls is that a lot of times we get that sales meeting. And how are we getting that meeting? Well, more often than not, it comes through a button on the website. And what is that button called? It's called Book a Demo. And, we can thank our marketing brethren for popping that out there. So we get on the call, and what is the customer expecting at that point? They've probably done some research. They think they need a solution like ours, and they hit the Book a Demo, and they're wanting a demo, and they're asking for a demo, and they booked a demo. So what did the kind of an ordinary salesperson do? Well, they wanted to do what the customer expects, right? And they want to deliver. They want to please. Let's face it, as sellers, we're in the service business and we want to please. So we get on and we start explaining our solution a lot of times, explaining who we are, where the company came from, a little bit about us. And then we go about explaining the solution and demonstrating the solution. And we fall into that trap. And why is it a trap? Well, the buyer is significantly through their research on their own, which is something that, the modern kind of buyer does. And they think they know what kind of a solution they want.
Yeah.
And if they do answer any questions, it's often oriented towards that point of view that they got from their own research. Well, how I liken it, Chris, is it's a lot like when we go to visit a doctor nowadays, whereas a buyer or as a patient, we're going to go out, and what do? If we have something that ails us, we go and do a whole bunch of research on WebMD and all of
Mhm.
the other medical sites. We might go on forums, and then we get into the doctor's office and says, Doc, I did a bunch of research and, this is what I'd like for you to prescribe for me. And a good doctor will take a time out and say, all right, I know you've done a bunch of research. I know, but it's not about prescribing it or doing this surgery or doing that. Let's take the time and truly understand what is the issue. A bad doctor will just go and prescribe, and here's your script, and I'll see you later. 10 minutes later, they've collected their payment for that transaction, and who knows if the patient had a good outcome or not. So we want to be like the good doctor, and that to me is what
Mhm.
good selling is about today. It's being that good doctor. It's taking the time to slow the customer down and truly understand what their issues are and figure out a way to
Mhm.
do that in a way that's not off-putting to them, because ultimately they want to get their problem solved as quickly as possible. And you're asking them to slow down. So you've got to be effective at doing that, but it's asking the right questions. It's doing the diagnostic. It's getting to what truly ails them and then being prescriptive in that. So it's not explaining or demonstrating what might solve the problem that they know they're coming to you with. It's diagnosing the issues they might not even know they have and truly prescribing something that ultimately they need, which may or may not be what you're offering, but will be better for them in the long term.
Yeah, how about that? And that last thing, I'll start with the end. So many good points there. It may or may not be what you're selling. I mean, it's very possible we're going to qualify them in or out of our
Correct.
pipeline. And
Yes.
think about the credibility. Often we're behind on quota, we're a little bit desperate. So we're looking for any signs of yes. And then it bites us down the road, right? Because now
It does.
we wonder why we're not going to close that person. And we invested so many resources, our own time, other people's times, and everything else. But yeah, that's great. And, this is something that came up years ago. Some of our conversations coming back
Mhm.
to me. And I think you said this then, and I've copied it many times, is the doctor doesn't let his or her patients diagnose them, self-diagnose. You shouldn't either. And it is a balance because today's consumer knows way more than a decade or
Mhm.
two ago, but they're not you. And the number one thing we can do to enhance relationships is to do that. And, for the audience, before we started recording, I told Tom a really cool question somebody asked me. They said, what's the number one thing you see that the very best sales professionals do that others don't? And I love Tom's answer. I'll let him say what it was in a second. And I said, I have about five, right? But, under the pressure, I said, they create pain where others can't. So it's
Mhm.
status quo. We teach this 6, 7, 8 program in our objection handling, which is only 7 objections that exist in all of selling. And the number one, all of my clients, like you, Tom, we both have clients
Mhm.
in so many different verticals. Every single one of them, the number one objection they have is status quo. I'm already happy, or, I'm not going to throw resources, I'll put it on the back burner. But the very best sales professional, she can create pain and urgency where others, it's going to be kicked down the can a little bit later.
Mhm.
Yours was different, and the way that you fixed my answer was with what yours was. So the number one thing that top sales professionals do, in your opinion, is what?
Is storytelling. They are master storytellers. And why do you have to be a good storyteller? Well, a story has a couple of key elements, and there's four that we teach. One is that you need a hero in the story, and too often a seller will come in thinking that they're the hero. I'm the doctor to
Mhm.
save the day. I'm, the all perniscient, know it all, see it all, do it all kind of capability. And the better seller knows how to make the customer the hero.
Yeah.
When it comes to a good story, you need a villain. And too often we villainize the person that we're selling to, like, oh, you don't know that you shouldn't be doing this way? There's clearly a
Mhm.
better way. Well, obviously, that doesn't do us any good. You need to make the villain something external, not the organization, not the politics, not the person that you're selling to. There needs to be a good shape to a story. If you jump to the solution or jump to who you are too soon, you're spoiling the happily ever after in a way. You need to build it up, and you build it up with pains and impacts. You have to reveal that they've got an issue. You've got to build up the tension and the suspense before you ultimately reveal a solution and the happily ever after. And so we use this curve called pivot, pain, impact, vision, outcomes, and trust as a storyteller's arc to help walk the seller and the customer through. And then you need a bigger purpose, a why. Why are we here at all together? Because there's a bigger good versus evil to ultimately solve, right? There's that bigger purpose of why we do what it is that we do. And it's tying everything back to that bigger purpose that I think is key.
That's awesome. Really good stuff there. When and where should sales professionals use the power story?
I think right from the opening, honestly, I think right from the first outreach, you should be trying to paint a story. When I look at prospecting, most of the prospect emails I get will talk very specifically about, hey, we got a new solution and here's what it does. And it's explaining what it is the company does or what they do or who they are. And it's all about them and not about me as a buyer.
Yeah.
So I think right from the beginning, you need to prospect with storytelling and you need to connect and educate around the pains that others like them are or should be experiencing that, ultimately, you could solve, but make it about them and make it about the pain. And so right from the beginning, you can do that. When you first meet with a customer, a lot of times, what do companies start with? An about us kind of presentation, right? They talk about, hey, we've been founded, by this person. Here's our
Yeah.
tombstones of logos. Here's how fast we're growing. Who cares? I don't even know if I should be paying attention at this point. Instead, educate me. Educate me around what other chief revenue officers or what other financial planners like me, what are they experiencing that I should be paying attention to? And what is it costing me by not paying attention to that? And so you make it about the issues that they have and the challenges that they have, very much a challenger-esque approach.
Yeah.
And one of the other key elements, I think, where storytelling can be really powerful gets to an incredibly important issue that most buyers are facing today, Chris, and that is confidence. So back when Challenger was written, it was a lot about the status quo, and I completely agree with that. And it was, how do we break through the status quo to get buyers to change? And the way to do that is you get them emotionally charged about the pain. We move away from pain more than we move to gain. Then you have to kind of get into the logic of financially justifying why they should make that change. So once they understand why change, now you motivate them with the why now of the, hey, here's the financial justification of why you want to prioritize this maybe above some other issues you have. But there's a third element now today that's essential, and that is trust. Whereas in the past, 10 years ago when Challenger was written, the emotional charging of trying to get someone to change was, let's say 50% of the buying decision was made based on emotion. Now it's only 25% and 25% on logic, and trust is actually 50%. So buyers have a lack of confidence in the decision-making. Why? Decisions are more risky. It's their job if they make the wrong decision. It's decision by committee because it's so risky. And so now
More so than ever.
Consensus. Yeah, exactly. And so, and the other thing is that because there's consensus now, there's a lot of compromise being done. The buying processes are more complex internally, and buyers aren't even sure. They're not sure that you're the right choice, that the solution that you're pitching is the right choice, and that they're even able to make the right decision internally. So there's internal and external friction that's being created that's causing this lack of confidence. Gartner had some interesting research. Over the past 3 years, buying confidence has gone from 27% of deals, only 1 in 4 about being viewed as a good decision looking back, to now being 17%. That's a 40% decline over 3 years. 2/3 of buyers, they regret the decision not too soon after the ink is dry. 2/3. And when many of us rely on LAER, LAER, like land and expand revenue, right?
Yeah.
When you have 2/3 of buyers expressing regret right after the ink is dry and a 40% decline in buyer confidence, we're not helping buyers make good decisions. And that should be probably our number one job is, yes, motivate, yes, justify, but instill confidence is actually one of the biggest elements that we have to do nowadays. What about the expand revenue? What about even the retention revenue? That's going to be at risk on an ongoing basis. So we've got to do a better job of selling to make buyers confident in their initial purchase, which then will lead to better land and expand revenue on an ongoing basis. And being a good storyteller, I think, is a big part of that, where, are you able to get the buyers, the whole buying committee, truly to understand why they should have confidence in the why change, why now, why you as a provider, and then why their process is a good one and will lead to ultimately a good decision and good results. And it all comes back to outcomes and value. And that's what we need the storytelling to be centered around, is that there's value to be gained in solving that pain and achieving better outcomes. And there's value to be realized, and that you're going to be there throughout that whole process to manage that and to help them gain that value.
Yeah, well said. I really enjoyed that segment, Tom. And, Peter Guber authored a book called Tell to Win. And in there, he shares an example of when you tell somebody a story, you're not back to trust, right? And not to keep dropping books in there, but Stephen Covey, who's not a Stephen Covey fan, Stephen Covey's son, Stephen M.R. Covey, authored a book, Speed of Trust. And if you're in sales, I love your data. I hadn't heard that before, but if you're in sales, you're in the trust business. And back to Peter Guber, he talks about it allows the audience, your audience, so audience of one or 1,001, it allows them to get their guard down, right? Because if you ever try to sell to a defensive customer, good luck, right? It's bouncing off. Now we have open two-way communication, and his words are, they come along on this magic carpet ride. And you said something in the beginning, how this all kind of works together. You're not trying to be the hero. This magic carpet ride, when you're done telling your story, it becomes our story. And that person can see themselves as the hero, as you say. So I really enjoyed that part that you just laid out for the audience. Great stuff. Really, really good stuff. You said something else, our job, when you're talking about confidence, I agree with that. And I thought you were going down the road of the healthy confidence, the preparation that we need to do as somewhat of a subject matter expert, and being able to bring value and articulate value and experiences, share a story, all those things. But you were actually talking about giving the buyer confidence. And you also said that we need to partner with them to help them make the right decision. And I want to say this again, because I think you'll agree, and please, it's totally fine that actually the audience would have joined if you didn't agree, would enjoy if you didn't agree with this. But I think if that audience really feels like, hey, listen, I came here thinking that we might be a fit for each other and this is where we are going. And by all means, that is what we're hoping the outcome is. But if it's clear that we can't help them, but our knowledge is somebody else can, even what you and I were talking about before we started recording it, where we might be able to help each other out, think of the credibility that you're going to get. And guess what? Success leaves tracks. And now I trust you. Like, oh my gosh, you actually said, hey, another one of my clients had a problem that's, you're a little bit, I'm not right for you. But back to your doctor analogy, they do it all the time, right? Hey,
Absolutely.
I do surgery, but I'm going to recommend you go to this top therapist. You're not ready for surgery.
Yeah. And the worst doctors are the ones that don't do that, or the ones that go a little bit overboard or outside of the things that they've done that's in their specialty, and they try something new, or they get in over their head, even in process, and they proceed with a procedure that maybe they've only done a couple of times when they really have no business doing it, and they should just sew you back up and recommend you to the specialist. And I've seen that happen again. And David Goggins, the strongest man alive, ex-Navy SEAL author, talks about that in one of his books, where he had to get a knee surgery, and it was supposed to be a relatively routine procedure. Doctor goes in and breaks the saw, because his tendons are so strong from all of the multiple long distance runs that he's done, and then proceeds to execute a procedure that he had never done before, but had read about and thought it would have a good outcome. And he called an audible. Chris Goggins wakes up, can't walk, has to go to a specialist. And thank goodness the specialist was able to put him back together again, so he could go on and do many more ultra marathons and many more things that inspire many of us in the performance field. But there was a case where the doctor overreached. And I think what we want to do is we want to be, like I said, the good doctor of diagnose properly, execute on what we can do really well, be ready to recommend that they go elsewhere, or maybe go down a different route if it doesn't serve them. Because in the end, we want customers for life. We want these customers that are going to be satisfied, that think there's a high quality deal that was done, that don't have regret right after the deal was signed, because those don't do us good in the long term. And as a seller, I think we're here for a bigger purpose than just that transaction and making that quarterly quota. And I think those deals
Exactly
add
right.
up for us over a long period of time. Those relationships add up for us. The satisfaction, the stories of success add up for us over time. And that's what we need to look for. I've even had customers that I've turned away for the right reasons, because the services of the software or whatever I was dealing with at that time weren't the right fit. But they've come back to me over time
There you go.
because I did that. And when they did have a problem that I could solve, or even if they were looking for just general advice, they still come back to me at times. And those are relationships you can count on for life.
Yeah, in today's world, it's amazing that people sometimes they get short-sighted. They want to hit their quarterly numbers, what they need to do. I had a client, this came up at a sales training conference that we had. Gosh, this was before COVID. And the manager and the rep were having some heated words out in the hallway. And she brought it up in front of the audience, which it got a little uncomfortable. And I tried to just kind of, divert and keep the class going. But the manager said, no, let's talk about this. And his point was, we have a fiduciary responsibility to our bottom line. We work for the company. This is what's going on. Her point was, there was an order that she had that they know. I mean, I don't want to say the company name or anything, but she knew that because of some turnover that they had recently, they could not handle the job. It was going to be a disaster. And they sell legal services. So there were going to be potential sanctions from the courts. There are going to be a lot of issues this end user is going to have. She suggested they call a competitor, and gave a competitor's name and why she gave that name and everything, and was very honest about, hey, I'll be here for you next time. We're going to replace this person that's going to have a Six Sigma degree in process and blah, 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 but they're not on board yet. I'm going to have to pass on this one. The manager disagreed. And he put me in a really tough position, because, you're never wrong for doing the right thing. And what was this person thinking? But again, the best story about that is the president told the story a few years later, simply because the manager obviously wasn't there any longer.
Yeah.
And you can't see, we all have our core values and things, and they're supposed to be something other than words on the wall. We're actually supposed to live by them, right? Hey, let me go back. I love the analogies. I love the doctor analogy. I love the pain analogies. How about, and I almost don't want to cloud your mind with how I teach, and I want to get your opinion for our audience, Tom. The difference of the doctor analogy is that patient walked in to see the doctor, and the doctor doesn't start saying, oh, here's what you need. The doctor has to ask questions. Where's it hurt? How long has it been going? So the doctor's forced to go into discovery. In sales, when we're cold calling, or it's a cold outreach or something, that would be like the doctor popping into your family room, right? That doesn't happen. So what does a prospect need to do to stay true, to try to be that subject matter expert, try to make a business case, ask questions, or plant seeds of fear, uncertainty, and doubt that with their current status is the right? How do they do it when they weren't invited in, that they were the cold call person, and they know they're dealing with a little bit of that guard still being up? What recommendation do you have at that point?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. One of the keys is that when you're that doctor, the patient did come to see you. And so you've got that right to ask questions. And what I think is hard for the seller is they think they've got that one shot right then and there to communicate as much as possible about who they are, what the solution can do, how it's better. And we used to teach something in performance driving. I was a Porsche BMW driving school instructor and racer. And there was a mantra. We had all these mantras for keeping the shiny side up in your car and ending the weekend safely, because you oftentimes had to drive your car home. These were street cars that we were teaching our students in. And one of them was go in slow to come out fast. A lot of times as a racer, you'd get in the car and you'd want to go into the corner fast and kind of wrestle the car around and mangle it around, and it's all out of balance and out of sorts. And then you're trying to stomp on the gas as quickly as possible to gain acceleration out of the corner and down that next straight. And the key to a lot of performance driving is to do the opposite. It's to go in not very slowly, but a little bit more slowly than you actually think, to get the car, keep it under control, keep it balanced, get it pointed, and then step on the gas. And you're actually stepping on the gas earlier at that time and accelerating faster out of the corner. Very similar. So you have to slow things down, but do it in a way that is still constructive. So you've got to slow it down by asking questions and doing proper discovery. So to me, discovery is the key. Now, does that mean you don't ever get to do a demo in that first call? No, I think a lot of times buyers do expect you to show something and to tell something. And I think if you leave them without that, they can sometimes be disappointed. There are some sales methodologies or some sales leaders that say, we will not show a presentation or demonstrate anything in that first call. And sometimes that can leave customers with that hard, fast rule disappointed. You've got to make sure you do three things in the discovery process. And we like to use the term MAP. So motivation for change, right? So what is motivating the buyer to ultimately change, their motivation for doing something differently? How aligned is your solution to that? And then ultimately, what are some of the parameters around the process they're going to go through to make a decision? Who's going to be involved? Who needs to be involved? What are the typical steps? Those kind of things. Around the motivation for change, you've got to be able to a lot of times prompt with insights to get them to share. One of the challenges, Chris, that you've got is because the patient didn't come to see you, you went to see them, is you've got to earn the right to ask questions. A lot of times an inexperienced seller will go in with a list of questions and all of a sudden they'll start reading off of it. And it becomes an interrogation. Instead, it has to be sharing. And prompting with insights means that you're sharing experiences, sharing stories, sharing research around why they should be paying attention to the issues that you're talking about or that they're talking about, and reinforcing that there's a serious impact of not addressing these issues. So going in with that educational mindset and educational content can then get a dialogue going for sharing around the motivations for change.
That's really strong. And now I'm starting to remember why 10 years ago, you and I shut the bar down in Prestwood Country Club, because we were sharing all these kind of things. Yeah, we agree. You know, earning the right is something really important. I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is even on that initial call, if they pick up a cold call, let's say it's going well, they do some of the things that you laid out so well, a little bit of map or whatever it might be, and discover, you start getting a little bit of a spark. But the challenge is, if you try to advance the call before you've done some of that, you haven't earned the right to do it, because we forget there. And listen to some of the data you shared with us. You taught us already here on this call, Tom. If 40% of the decisions that I've made in the last couple of years, I'm disappointed in, and now here's somebody putting me on the spot. I wasn't expecting this call. You want me to, I get it's a baby step close. You want to get my time for the next calls, what you're about to ask. Sure. You forget, I got 99 other people, you know, somehow you got in front of me. If the gatekeeper let you by, or I picked up for some reason, which that's getting harder and harder all the time also, with, you know, how people are getting really good at hiding post-COVID, especially. But we have to earn the right to do it. But if you try to advance the call and you haven't earned the right, it gets back to what you said earlier, is how are you going to do that without the power story? Because short of experiencing it yourself, which you haven't, you're a prospect, I have to share a story that resonates. We call them story with strategic intent. You did a great job outlining, you know, talking about they're in the hero and the story arc and how you teach it. Sometimes I hear people tell a story and I'm like, wait a minute, why the hell did you tell that story? Or you said, I'm like, it had nothing to do with anything we were taught. You're like, if it's about, you know, fishing or golf and it's for bonding rapport, yeah, that's great. But that's not a story with strategic intent. They do forget and they need to practice these things.
Yes.
Good. Absolutely. So Frugalnomics is one of the things you're doing. You're doing something else now with Genius Drive. You're helping sales professionals so many different ways. We've talked before about your background with Gartner, which I always appreciate, the data and the research that you've been part of over your entire sales career. How about this? Let me reach into your crystal ball a little bit. We got artificial intelligence. We got people getting better at hiding than ever before. We have more and more decision makers in complex sales and B2B sales that you and I both operate in. What's the future? What do we need to continue? Is it what you already told us, or is there something else that you think, a different skill, a different muscle we need to flex in the next couple of years than maybe not so much before COVID or the last couple of years.
Yeah, let's, Chris, hit on AI a little bit. I use it every day. It helps me with my writing, helps me with my research, helps me with, prospecting, outreach,
How'd you use
ideas.
it? How'd you use it today? Like for our
Yeah.
salespeople out there that haven't logged on, they haven't done Chat GPT, they haven't done anything. If you were going to get like, how'd you use it? The average
So
person?
we're prospecting, or we're meeting with a company we hadn't met before. And I put in the URL for that company. I put in some background about it and said, and it also has cataloged our selling materials. And I basically asked it, give me the talking points that I should highlight around the issues this company might be having that I want to focus on. So the pain and the impact kind of piece of my story, I asked it for help on that. And it just gives me the idea list. I keep it next to me during the call and I can glance at it. And as they're talking, if they didn't bring up 2 points, I maybe go to it and say, well, other companies like my idea is that they might have this issue and this issue around how they're selling or how they're not meeting buyer expectations when they're selling. Are you experiencing the same thing? So it gives me those kind of pointed notes on whether I'm creating a prospecting email or whether I'm doing a meeting and want meeting guidance. I'll also ask the same thing when it comes to solutioning. Give me some solution ideas around it. So it's kind of that assistant, that second brain I can always ask for ideas and collaboration when maybe I don't want to bother a peer to do the same thing. So the good news is it lets me do more, and it can help to scale, and it can help to scale operations. Today as well, I've got bots reaching out on LinkedIn to connect up with the right people, to share some content with them, and to prospect. The challenge becomes, are we scaling practices that aren't good? And I think a lot of times that is the case, that AI could be used for good, and it could be also used for quote unquote evil, right? Not intentionally, but if it's just doing the same old outreach, but now doing it on a scale level that's way bigger than what we did before, or it's not creating value in the process. I think there's going to be more of that going on than more of the good going on. And I believe it's going to create an incredible opportunity for a seller who is authentic, who is truly a good doctor, who can use AI for the right things and be authentic and transparent and truthful and everything else, where the AI could come off as artificial and foreign and discomforting instead of comforting. So I think we're going to have a decided lack of empathy that gets conveyed. I think we're going to have a decided lack of trust that gets conveyed. And I
Which
believe
you already
that,
told us is half the battle, right?
It's already 50% where buyers don't have confidence in the decision. How much more is it going to be? And that was pre-AI, this year, because it's every 6 months now. It's another level of AI that's ratcheting up. We're living in a world of non-trust, in a way, of disinformation that exists. And so can you be truth in it? And what does that look like? And what does that mean? Can you be the good doctor in this environment in it? And I think that's where ultimately success comes from in the future, is there's a bigger opportunity to slow down, a bigger opportunity to be more authentic, a bigger opportunity to generate confidence in you, in the decision, in everything that you do. And I think that is the key to selling success over the next 2 years.
I really enjoyed your comment about making sure that we're building it's almost like your kids, right? One of the things you want to do is give your kids confidence to be the best human beings that they can be. And, I'm an empty nester now, my wife and I are, and so many times, I think you're 2 years older than me last time I checked there. So, we got it, right? You look younger though, whatever you're doing, keep taking, and you're not even in Florida anymore. You went to New York.
I know, in New York, it should be aging me, but it's not.
Are you in the city? Where are you in New York, Tom?
I am. Yeah. I'm right in Midtown, Flatiron, Nomad, Chelsea area. It's been awesome. The amount of energy in the city and smart young people, it is engendered another whole level of motivation for me to keep up with all these young, smart folks.
Good for you. Well, the wisdom that you're going to be passing on, they're lucky to have you there. So the confidence, to close the loop on that we want to give our kids, but I hadn't looked at it like I want to make sure I'm giving the confidence. I guess in a way, just the word is so perfect, right? There was a 1968 Harvard Business School study that I talk about back to what's the number one trait of the top persuaders or communicators, and yes, salespeople, and it's a balance of ego and empathy.
Mhm.
And you said something else earlier that with AI and lack of empathy, things of that nature, we have to realize, and let's get back to prospecting, which is often, building that pipeline, a real pipeline. It's the hardest thing that salespeople do today. Enough empathy to realize, holy crap, AIs, bots, all the crap getting thrown their way, the people using it for evil. You have to have a little empathy there, but then enough healthy confidence when they go, I'm good, just send me something. We've practiced and we prepared, quite frankly, a micro story. Like you're not going to, maybe you haven't earned the right to tell the 4-minute story, but you've earned the right to say, hey, Mike, I get it. You weren't expecting this call, real quick, because it reminds me so much of, and you could kind of get into something, but then your ask is small. Hey, let's talk in the future, whatever it might be, but really helpful. But I want to make sure, even me personally, and I think our audience, I hope they look at that. Let's take a look at our best practices, and are we making our buyers or decision makers more confident to become a champion or to say yes or shorten the sales cycle? I think I'm going to review that myself. I think that's an opportunity for me to get a little better too. So I'm glad you shared it. Tom, listen, this was awesome. I had so many questions, but as I expected this to just flow from the ROI guy himself, it did. And I think you covered so much of this as we've gone through this. But Tom's company is Genius Drive. He's phenomenal what he does. We have mutual friends, and we probably share more than just IBM from back in the day with different clients. But I look forward to being a part of your network, staying in touch. And thanks for all the wisdom you gave to our audience today.
Thank you, Chris. And thank you all for listening. Really appreciate it.
God, and oldie buddy goodie. How long has Frugalnomics, the survival guide, been out now? Over a decade, more than
It's
that,
a decade.
right?
Yeah. It's a little bit. Yeah, about a
Yeah.
decade. Yeah. And Evolved Selling is the newer version of it, but the Frugalnomics Survival Guide is still so relevant and has so many good content in it. And it's a picture book. So it tries to make it easy to learn how to do some of this value-added communication, storytelling, and value selling.
Yeah, and Frugalnomics is another easy read that you can go through and grab a lesson here, a lesson here. I think salespeople sometimes like that and pop it in there. But thank you again, Tom. Really appreciate it. For our audience, until next time, CD out.